My parents beat me at my brother's birthday party just because I wouldn't give them my $450,000 condo, so I took their house instead. If your family ever treated you like an obligation instead of a person, stay with me. This story is for you. The invitation arrived in a thick cream envelope with gold embossed calligraphy, the kind you keep on display to impress neighbors. I stared at my name, Miss Ava Morgan, written in my mother's handwriting. The first thing she'd addressed to me in nearly a year. The seal was still warm from the courier's hands, but I felt cold all over. I didn't need to open it. I already knew what it was. Still, I slid it open with the tip of my thumbnail and unfolded the card. You are cordially invited to the engagement celebration of Jason Morgan and Danielle Chen, November 17th, 2023. A laugh escaped me. Dry, involuntary. It echoed through the apartment's stillness like something had cracked. The last time I was invited to a family party, I ended up standing outside in the freezing rain for 45 minutes while my parents debated whether to let me back in. I had made the mistake of disagreeing with my father during dinner. Apparently that ruined the mood. I walked into the kitchen and tossed the card into the recycle bin. Then I stood there. I didn't move. Not because I had doubts, but because some part of me knew this wasn't over. The phone rang 20 minutes later. Hi, sweetheart. My mother's voice floated in like a sugar-coated dart. Did you get the invitation? I did. I hope you'll come. The family's asking, and you know how people talk. Jason and Danielle really want everyone there. I pictured her carefully curated expression, concern laced with control, the queen of composed coercion. You haven't spoken to me in 11 months. Oh, Ava, don't be dramatic. Families drift. We're still family. There was a pause. Besides, this would be a perfect time to talk about the apartment. It would mean so much to your father, after all we've done for you. There it was, the transaction dressed in sentiment. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. I have to go, I said. Ava, click. I sat back down on my couch, staring at the wall, my pulse ticking at my temples. It wasn't the first time they brought it up. The condo I bought 3 years ago, a 2-bedroom downtown with exposed brick and a view of the skyline, had become the new family fixation. They hadn't contributed a cent. But when Grandma passed, leaving me a small inheritance I used as a down payment, suddenly it became our family's investment. A symbol of betrayal that I hadn't used it for Jason, for them, for anything but myself. I got up, walked to the hallway, and opened the closet safe. Inside was a slim black folder and a lockbox. I pulled them both out and laid them on the kitchen island. The condo's title was crisp, notarized, fully paid off. My name, and only my name, was stamped across the bottom. Beneath that was a separate envelope. Grandma's will, copied and certified. I hadn't read it in a long time, but her words always stuck with me. To Ava, I leave what they tried to deny her: ownership, autonomy, and the freedom to live untethered. And then there was the key. Small, silver, almost decorative. I had worn it once on a chain, not knowing what it opened. Grandma gave it to me on my 18th birthday with nothing but a cryptic, "You'll know when to use it." It felt heavier now than it did then. My phone buzzed. Claire, you don't have to go, but if you do, don't go unarmed. I typed back, "What qualifies as a weapon?" She replied instantly, "A certified deed, your spine, and good boots." I cracked a smile. Claire always knew when to be serious and when to be sharp. As I refiled the documents and folded a copy of the title deed into my purse, my eyes fell on a photo tucked in the side pocket of the safe. Jason and I at ages 6 and 10. Halloween. I was a witch. He was a pirate. We were laughing. There was no pretending back then. I paused. Last year, Mom had called and told me Jason's wedding budget had run dry. They wanted me to sell my car. "You barely use it anyway," she had said, as my contribution to the family. When I refused, the call stopped. Now they wanted the condo instead. I held the key in my hand. Maybe I didn't know what had opened, but I knew what I was locking behind me. I slid the deed copy into my purse. This time, I wouldn't be the one pretending. My brother's engagement party had a guest list, a champagne wall, and a script. I wasn't supposed to speak unless spoken to. I parked 3 blocks away, not because there was no space closer, but because I needed the walk. The street was already lined with luxury sedans and rideshare SUVs dropping off guests in sequins and sports coats. String lights arched over the Morgan property like something out of a wedding magazine, and heaters pulsed warm air into the cool November night. It was the kind of evening you were expected to photograph for social media and never question in real life. As I turned the corner, I caught sight of the massive white tent set up in the backyard, complete with a grazing table, fairy lights woven into trellises, and a champagne wall sparkling like it had been imported straight from Pinterest. A violinist played near the edge of the patio. Someone in a velvet blazer popped a bottle and laughed like his teeth had never clenched in silence. Jason's engagement was a performance, and we were all just actors. Some of us had been given lines. I hadn't. A server with a tray of Prosecco offered me a glass before I even reached the first group of guests. I took one and murmured a polite thank you, already hearing my mother's voice from 1,000 childhood functions. Smile pretty and don't make trouble. I spotted her by the fireplace. Linda Morgan in her signature cream wrap dress, laughing like she hadn't rehearsed every breath. She saw me and lit up with a performative gasp. "Ava," she called, arms open as if we'd been close all along. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, deadpan. Richard appeared beside her, drink in hand. "Look who's graced us tonight," he said, squeezing my shoulder just a little too firmly. "We were starting to think you might have moved away." Jason emerged from the crowd just in time, saving me with an awkward half-hug. "Thanks for coming," he said, quietly enough so only I could hear. "I had questions," I replied, "but I thought I'd ask them in person." He smiled tightly and gestured toward the center of the tent. "They want a family photo." Of course they did. Someone handed me a glass of rosé I hadn't asked for, and before I could object, I was ushered into position. Linda on one side, Richard on the other, Jason and Danielle in front. The photographer gave instructions. I followed them. My smile was practiced, hollow, immaculate. "Hold it, perfect," the man said, clicking away. I stepped back as quickly as I could, making my way to the edge of the party where the noise blurred into a low hum. That's when I saw her. Claire. Leaning against one of the standing heaters, she held a flute of sparkling water and wore a black wool coat that made her look half invisible. Her eyes met mine, and she gave a single nod, a lifeline in lipstick. The microphone crackled from the center of the yard, and Richard stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are so honored to have all of you here tonight to celebrate Jason and Danielle. 2 people we love deeply. But tonight is about more than just a couple. It's about family." He glanced toward me. I froze. "Some of you know," he continued, "our daughter Ava has generously decided to transfer her apartment, the one downtown, as part of the wedding gift. It's something she promised years ago, and we're just so touched that she's keeping her word." My glass nearly slipped from my fingers. I hadn't promised anything. Ever. Before I could react, Linda glided up to the mic with a practiced laugh. "She's just shy about speaking in front of people," she said. "But we know her heart." The crowd applauded. Polite, clueless, complicit. I felt the weight of 100 eyes pivoting toward me. My face burned. I didn't move. Claire raised her phone slowly and tapped her screen. Richard walked across the floor toward me, still holding the mic. His smile never wavered. "Say something, sweetheart." He held it out to me like a gift, like a dare. I looked him in the eye, then at the microphone. And without a word, I turned my gaze back to the crowd and handed the glass to a passing waiter. My silence screamed louder than anything I could have said. Richard hesitated, then pulled back, teeth clenched behind his grin. Guests chuckled awkwardly. Danielle's mother glanced at her watch. Jason looked down. The playlist resumed. Applause faded. Linda looped an arm around my back and leaned in, whispering through her teeth, "You could have just nodded. Don't make this harder." I stepped away from her touch. The rest of the evening blurred into wine and white lies. I stood at the fringe while guests took photos, danced, and asked polite questions with impolite curiosity. Claire didn't come closer, but she never let me drift out of view. Around 9:30, Linda appeared beside me again. "Let's go inside," she said, voice low. "I want you to see the dressing room Danielle will use for the wedding. It's special." I followed her through the side door, my chest tightening. Not because of what was coming, but because I finally knew I wouldn't play this game much longer. "We'll settle this later," Dad says, smiling for the cameras. "We always do." He slapped me across the face. Not behind closed doors, not in a whisper, but in front of the chandelier and 24 wedding guests. The sting came half a second after the sound. A sharp, involuntary gasp from somewhere to my right told me someone had seen it. Felt it, even if they wouldn't say a word. The music hadn't stopped yet. That was the strangest part. Some mindless jazz cover of a pop song still fluttered through the air like nothing had happened. My cheek burned. My ears rang. I didn't raise a hand to touch my face. I didn't move at all. Richard Morgan, my father, lowered his hand slowly, as if realizing what he'd done only after the heat left his palm. Behind me, Linda let out a gasp. Her hand flew to her mouth. Not because she was shocked, but because she needed to look shocked. Like this wasn't the climax of a conversation they'd been scripting since I walked in the door. 5 minutes earlier, she had led me into the dressing room, a soft-lit lounge off the main hallway where Danielle was supposed to prepare for her wedding day. It was tastefully decorated in white and blush tones, with a full-length mirror and a chaise in the corner. A bottle of vintage rosé sat unopened on a tray. "I thought you'd like to see where Danielle will get ready," Linda had said, but the door had barely closed before her tone changed. "You embarrassed us." I said nothing, I replied. "Exactly," she hissed. Richard had entered a moment later, closing the door behind him. His voice at first was low, measured. "We gave you a chance to do the right thing." "There was nothing to give," I said. "It's my property. I never promised." "You owe this family," he snapped. "And this family's done what exactly for me in the last 5 years?" I stared at both of them. Besides remind me I was a mistake for not becoming Jason's second wallet. Linda's voice rose into a sob. "We raised you. We fed you, paid for your school, No, Grandma paid my tuition. You just took the credit." "Don't talk about her," Richard said, his jaw tight. "You're not the only one she left something to." "No," I said coldly, "but I'm the only one she trusted." He stepped toward me. "You will sign the transfer, Ava. Tonight. We'll make it official before this goes any further." I reached for the door. That's when it happened. The slap wasn't premeditated. It was instinct. The kind that lives in people who've mistaken control for love for so long they can't tell the difference anymore. The chandelier overhead tinkled softly, disturbed by the sudden movement. In the next room, someone dropped a glass. My cheek throbbed. Linda cried louder, now full-throated. "You made him do this. You push and push and push." "Enough," I said. "You don't get to cry over something you created." And then the door opened again. Claire stood there, one arm raised, phone screen glowing. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the room like steel. "Smile, Mr. Morgan. This is assault, and we're pressing charges." Richard blinked, stunned. "You think I wouldn't come prepared?" Claire stepped inside. "The audio from the toast? The guests watching? Half the room saw you raise your hand." "You don't get to interfere," Linda spat. "I'm her legal counsel. Claire replied. I'm required to interfere. Jason stood frozen in the hallway behind her, his mouth slightly open, one foot forward but unwilling to take the next step. The room had gone silent. No music, no laughter, just the thick, choking quiet of a mask falling off. Claire stepped beside me. You okay? I nodded once. She turned to Linda and Richard. I suggest you leave her alone, because starting tomorrow you'll be dealing with me. I walked out of the room, past Jason, past the crowd of guests now whispering and avoiding my gaze. I didn't care. Not anymore. Outside, the string lights still glowed. Champagne flutes lay abandoned on cocktail tables. Somewhere, the violinist was packing up his case. I stopped at the gate, inhaled once, then turned to Claire. Tomorrow, I said. We start. Claire gave a short nod. I already drafted the package. Just say the word. And I will. You want property? You're about to lose your own. They thought I'd show up crying. I showed up with Claire, a certified deed, and a notarized copy of a will they never expected. The glass doors of Bennett and Sloan clicked shut behind us with a soft hiss. The air inside the office was quiet, almost reverent, like the waiting room of a courthouse or a confession booth. The kind of place where no one raises their voice. Not because they're calm, but because the law doesn't need to shout to destroy you. Claire walked ahead of me, her heels making clean, confident taps along the marble hallway. 9th floor, Riverside building, neutral gray walls, frosted windows, no family photos, no warmth. Just results. Linda and Richard were already seated in the conference room. Richard was tapping his fingers against a tumbler of water. Linda clutched a tissue, though she hadn't cried yet. The performance had not begun. Jason wasn't there. Claire nodded at her assistant, who shut the door and clicked the privacy lock behind us. She placed her briefcase on the table, unzipped it, and pulled out a slim folder with a blue ribbon seal. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. This won't take long, Claire said, sliding the folder toward my parents. This is the deed for the property you currently reside in, 512 Cypress Grove Lane. Linda blinked. That's our house. No, I said evenly. It's mine. Richard gave a short, humorless laugh. You're mistaken. Claire opened the folder, revealing the title document. Signed and transferred by Ava Morgan in June 2021, under full mental capacity, witnessed by 2 neutral parties and recorded by Travis County. Deed held in protective trust until Ava Morgan reached 32 years of age. I turned 32 in August, I added. Happy birthday to me. Linda's voice cracked. This is fake. She never said anything about this. She would have told us. She did, I said. You just didn't listen. Claire pressed play on a tablet. The screen lit up with a dated video. Grandma sitting in her garden, the sun in her hair. To my granddaughter Ava, she said, I leave the home on Cypress Grove as promised. You've earned a place that no one can take from you. Richard's lips parted slightly. Linda let out a sob and reached across the table. She was confused near the end, she whispered. That's not fair. She was manipulated. Claire didn't speak. She simply pulled another folder from her case and opened it to reveal the timestamp certification, the witnesses' sworn statements, and the video's metadata. All notarized, all sealed. She knew exactly what she was doing, I said, and she knew exactly what you were capable of. Richard sat back. His fingers twitched toward his phone. Claire's eyes flicked to him. By the way, she said smoothly, we already sent full copies to your law firm. Your partners know. Your assistant confirmed receipt this morning. His hand dropped. Let me be clear, I said, resting my palms on the table. You have 30 days to vacate. That's generous, because legally, I could ask for immediate possession. But I'm not like you. Linda pressed the tissue to her mouth, shaking her head. We gave you everything, she whispered. You gave me silence, I said, and shame. Grandma gave me the only thing that ever felt like mine. I want to call someone, Richard said, but even he didn't sound convinced. You should, Claire replied, preferably a tax attorney. He stared at her. Because if you fight this, Ava adds, I'll open the trust account, the one tied to your misused tax filings. One slap, 2 cameras, and a whole city that suddenly had an opinion. By Black Friday, the video had over 2.3 million views. Claire hadn't uploaded it herself. She'd sent it to a journalist she trusted, and that was enough. The clip had been clipped, captioned, stitched into reaction videos, and set to moody acoustic music. Comment sections were flooded. Some people called it justified. Others called it sick. Everyone had something to say. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, filing cabinet open, folders spread across the rug like spilled secrets. The coffee table held half a sandwich I hadn't touched and 2 mugs, one cold, one going lukewarm. My phone pinged again. Podcast inquiry. Voices Unheard would like to feature you. Another ping. New comment. This woman is a legend. Quiet, precise revenge. A third. Miss Morgan, CNN affiliate, would like to request an interview. Please reply ASAP. I sighed and looked up at Claire, who sat opposite me with a laptop and a wall of open tabs. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, glasses low on her nose. She looked like someone doing triage at a media ER. No to CNN, she said without looking up. They'll want a soundbite and nothing else. Yes to Voices Unheard if you're ready. I'm not, I said honestly. She glanced at me. But you're close. My inbox was a storm. There were messages from strangers, women, mostly. Some who had cut off parents, some who couldn't. One said she watched the video 5 times just to see someone not back down. I didn't plan for this, I said. Good, Claire said. People who plan to be symbols usually make terrible ones. The buzzer rang. I didn't have to ask who it was. Jason stood in the hallway holding a takeout tray and wearing the face of someone who'd practiced his apology in the mirror, but still knew it wouldn't be enough. Can we talk? He asked. Claire gave me a look. I nodded. She stepped into the kitchen. Jason sat on the floor where I gestured, setting the tray down. I brought coffee. I didn't know what you like now. Black. Always has been. Right. There was a long silence. When we were kids, he started, I remember you getting locked out of the car at Grandma's funeral because you didn't wear the shoes Mom picked. I nodded. I didn't say anything. Number you didn't. I thought, if I stayed quiet, it wouldn't get worse. It got worse anyway, I said. He looked at me, eyes full of something not quite tears. I didn't know how to be brave. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that he was a kid, that it wasn't his job. But I couldn't. Not yet. You didn't have to protect me, I said quietly. You just had to not join them. He looked down. I'm sorry. I nodded once. That was all I had for him. Later, Claire and I reviewed the podcast invitation. The host was someone thoughtful, sharp, no sensationalism, no spin. I'll do it, I said. Sure? I don't want to be a spokesperson, I added, but I do want the truth out there. Claire clicked accept. The next day, we sat across from the host in a warm-lit studio with more books than microphones. She asked how it felt to have millions of people watching. I didn't want anyone to watch, I replied. I just wanted it to stop. And now? I want people to know what love doesn't look like. Blood doesn't equal kindness. And silence isn't love. When the episode aired, it reached the inbox of someone I hadn't heard from before, Danielle's mother. Her email was short. Dear Ava, I saw the video. I didn't know. I believe you. I support you. Elizabeth Chen. It was the first time anyone from Jason's future family acknowledged what had happened. Later that night, I sorted mail on the counter. Most of it was noise. Ads, condolence letters disguised as curiosity. But one stood out. An envelope with my name written in heavy black ink. Inside, a single printed line from my parents' former attorney. No appeal filed. They are preparing to vacate. Jason sat there for a long time after that. I didn't ask him to leave, but I didn't ask him to stay either. He kept looking around my apartment like it was a foreign country, one where the language was dignity, not guilt. "You really did this alone," he said eventually. "No one else was offering," I replied. He swallowed. "They always made it sound like you were dramatic. Difficult." I was quiet. I said, "That's all it takes to become inconvenient in this family." He stared at the floor. "I should have asked what you needed, not what they expected." It wasn't a grand revelation, but it was honest. And sometimes that counts more. After he left, I went back to the inbox. One message caught my eye. Not because it was longer or louder, but because it came from a women's legal advocacy organization I'd once admired from afar. They wanted to speak. Not to feature me, not to brand me, just to listen. "Would you consider becoming an honorary ambassador for our December outreach campaign?" I stared at the email for a while. Not long ago, the thought of speaking for anyone, let alone representing something, would have sent me into panic. But now, it felt right. Not because I had healed, but because I knew how far I hadn't. That night, Claire and I sat by the window, eating leftover curry and drinking overpriced canned wine. She scrolled through her tablet while I watched headlights on the street below. "You're not responsible for them," she said out of nowhere. "I know." She looked over. "But you still carry it like a debt." "I think I'm just not used to being believed." She nodded once. "That's the thing about justice. When it finally comes, it feels like guilt wearing someone else's coat." We clinked cans. I didn't know what kind of advocate I'd become, or if I even wanted to wear that title. But I did know this. People listened more when you spoke plainly, when you didn't try to sound righteous, just real. I kept the key, but not the house. The lock had changed, and so had I. The air smelled sharper in December. Not colder exactly, but cleaner, like the wind had finally swept the place of ghosts. The house stood quiet in the mid-morning light, its white trim newly painted, the front lawn cleared of dead leaves. I parked across the street and watched it for a moment, just to take it in. No cars in the driveway. No yelling behind the windows. No lawn statues or plastic holiday wreaths hung too early. Just a house. Still, waiting. Claire met me at the curb, holding a thin folder and a warm drink. She handed me the cup without a word. We didn't knock when we walked in. There was no one left to answer. The inside smelled like lemon and old wood. The floors creaked differently now. Less like protest, more like memory. The living room was bare. The dining table had been removed. In its place was a folding card table and 2 chairs, facing each other like they were ready for a final chess match. We walked through each room in silence. My footsteps echoed faintly. This was where my mother cried for effect, where my father rehearsed his control, where I learned to hold my breath for entire childhoods. But now it was just space. Neutral and still. In the bedroom closet, I found the small fireproof box I'd stored here months ago. I opened it and pulled out the only 2 things I wanted to keep: the silver key and a folded letter in my grandmother's handwriting. The ink had faded slightly, but her words hadn't. "One day," she had written, "you'll know what to do with this place. And when you do it fully." Downstairs, Claire spread the donation paperwork across the table. Her pen clicked softly. I read each line carefully. Nothing rushed. No part of this was about escape anymore. It was about intention. The recipient was a local nonprofit for women rebuilding their lives after domestic abuse. The name change was already approved: the Ava Morgan Center. I signed the final page. Claire glanced up. "So you're really letting it go?" "No," I said. "I'm finally holding on. To the right things." We sat in the quiet for a moment. Then I unfolded the letter again and traced a line with my finger. You were always the strong one, even when they made you feel small. Claire helped me close the folder, pack the last of the documents, and seal the envelope that would go to the county registrar. I stood by the front door for a minute longer, holding the key in my palm. It felt lighter than ever. Outside, I walked to the old cast-iron mailbox that still stood by the garden. I slid the key into the empty box, letting it rest on the cold metal. A single bird chirped from the telephone wire. I didn't look back. Ava puts the key in the last mailbox. She turns away, not looking back. She didn't burn the house down. She signed it away, brick by brick, memory by memory, turning a place of silence into shelter for those still finding their voice. Justice didn't roar that day, but it moved with quiet precision, cutting clean through the myths they built about blood and loyalty. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late. But once heard, it lingers, because no wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there still believes they're alone.